Hi, and welcome back to a second episode of Mini Mike Politics, a show that covers the fundamentals of government functions and political theories to give a new outlook on current social issues and foreign policy. Today, we are covering politics, the American government, and civic engagement, a topic that influences our daily lives and practically dictates what we do. This episode is going to be pretty dense because we're going to be talking not only about American government, we're going to be talking about all the different types of government, such as communist government, authoritarian government, democratically backsliding government, all that good stuff. So today's going to be pretty dense, and I'm going to be looking over at my laptop over here to source my information a lot this episode. So if I'm not looking at the camera, that is my bad. Politics is the process of gaining and exercising control within a government to set and achieve particular goals, especially those related to the division of resources within a nation. On the other hand, government is how a society organizes itself and how it allocates authority to accomplish collective goals and provide benefits to accomplish collective goals and provide benefits. Oh my, that was a load. Let me start that over. Government is how a society organizes itself and how it allocates authority to accomplish collective goals and provide benefits that the society as a whole requires to function. That being said, government systems are often confused with economic systems. This is because certain types of political thoughts or government organizations are closely related or developed with certain types of economic systems. A common example of this is the economic system of capitalism in Western Europe and Northern America, which developed roughly at the same time as the ideas of democratic republics, self government, and natural rights. At this time, the idea of liberty became a very important concept, such as something that the framers of the Constitution definitely had in mind when they were creating the Constitution. Hamilton. um, John Locke was an English philosopher who theorized that all people who should have natural rights to life, liberty, and property. From this, the idea that the people should be free to consent to being governed slowly developed into the idea that people should govern themselves through elected representatives and not a king. So let's just talk about the history of America and, you know, governments, like how America came to be. So, way back in the past, America was, taken over by British colonials. And, you know, they were, the British colonials were America was run by a king, basically. Let's just say that. And so the people, frustrated. The king, you know, was like telling them, dictating them what to do. And obviously, not many people like to be dictated on, how to live their daily lives. So then came the Article of Confederations, which is basically a list of things that the personal liberties that the British king was violating and what went wrong. So for quite a few years, quite a few, maybe decades, sorry, my bad, um, America was living off of the Article of Confederation, and like that that sort of promised, like, it was a weak central government because America was scared that having a strong central government would mean that, basically authoritarianism, and, you know, that means, oh, someone's taking control of us. We can't do this anymore. So they opted for a weaker central government, which eventually backfired on them. And soon they recognized that, we can't have a weak central government because we can't maintain our money. We can't maintain a military, which is necessary at the time for national defense. And just all this stuff, which eventually, almost made America collapse and made the economy collapse. So eventually, we came to the decision, the framers of the Constitution, they proposed the Constitution. If you've ever listened to Hamilton nonstop, right? They talk about, how they were writing how Hamilton, proposed the Constitution and as a better form of government, as a perfect structure for our American government, and, like, how that will help, like how that's much different than Articles of Confederations. So they wrote the Federalist Papers to make people get on the Federalist side. And everyone was like, no, we want the Bill of Rights. And then they added the Bill of Rights, and the Constitution was established. And that's how we have our form of government that we abide by so strictly today. Um, so that was a very important concept. And America's been built on this idea of representative democracy, which is what America is. It's a representative public democracy. I'll get into that later. But yeah, so at this time, they um, they slowly developed into the idea that people should govern themselves through elected representatives and not a king. And only those elected representatives chosen by the people had the right to make the laws and govern the people. Back to it. Adam Smith, a Scottish philosopher, believed that people should be free to acquire property in any way that they wished, and argued that instead of being controlled by the businesses and the government, people should be allowed to operate as they wish and keep the proceeds of their work. We often see this complete opposite kind of control with communism and Marxism, a society in which all property is publicly owned and each person's work is paid according to their abilities and needs. Representative government in capitalism, an economic system in which private owners control a country's trade and industry for profit, developed together in the US. Therefore, many Americans tend to equate democracy with capitalism. For reference, a democratic government promotes individualism and the freedom to act as one chooses, instead of being controlled. In contrast, capitalism relies on individualism. Democracy is not the global form of government. Instead, we have socialism, oligarchies, monarchies, dictatorships, and way more. Since there are so many and they're widely known, I'll touch on each one simply. Socialism is a broad political and economic theory that advocates for the means of production, distribution, and exchange should be owned or regulated by the workers rather than private businesses. I feel like many people tend to equate socialism and with Marxism and communism. And although they do have a similar goal to reduce inequality and class struggle and overlap in many economic and political discussions, they have very distinct concepts. And the three sort of develop something like this, right in order. Socialism emerged first as a response to extreme economic and social shifts caused by the Industrial Revolution and the struggle of the proletariat class. The proletariat, working class, grew increasingly poor while the bourgeoisie gained massive wealth. This sparked the need to create a system that would solve this problem. This was the basis for socialist theories combating the inequality between classes. Early social Early socialist thinkers like Charles Fourier came up with models to reorganize society, aligning with core values like cooperation and community rather than the capitalist way of competition and the free market controlling the supply and demand of goods. After this, Karl Marx, a German philosopher and economicist, collaborated with Friedrich Engels to write and publish the Communist Manifesto, which was published in 1848, which explained the basic needs of communism that was meant to be easily understood and inspired people to take action. One chapter of the short book criticized earlier socialist models, which we had talked about, and regarded them as utterly unrealistic utopian dreams. Marx argued that every history was a history of class struggle, and the proletariat, or the working class, would eventually take over the bourgeoisie and win control over the means of production and eliminate all classes forever. This can be seen as Marxism, a political, economic, and social philosophy that analyzes class conflict and the role of economics in society. If this seems confusing, there is most definitely reason behind it. In fact, Marx and Engels different themselves differently cons- okay, wait, cut this part out. If this seems confusing, there's most definitely reason behind it. In fact, Marx and Engels themselves consistently or clearly differentiate communism from socialism, which ensured lasting confusion between the two. So simply, they themselves didn't even know or clearly define the difference between socialism and communism, which clearly has made it very difficult to explain now. But if I'll touch on a few more points later that might help differentiate the two. Communism sometimes is referred to as the revolutionary socialism, one point why they're different, and and originated as a reaction to the Industrial Revolution, all stemming from Marxist theories. Communism is a political and economic ideology that advocates for a classless society where all resources and wealth are owned and controlled by the community as a whole. And the means of production are owned by the people. Under communism, private property does not exist, as all property is communally owned, while with each person receiving a portion based on what they need. A central government is typically responsible for controlling all aspects of economic production and supplying citizens with all basic necessities. Lastly, to compare communism with socialism, the means of achieving the two vary largely. In communism, the workers of the lower class rise up against the middle and upper classes in a violent revolution. In contrast, socialism is less rigid and more flexible, with an ideology seeking changes and reform through democratic processes within existing political and social structures. Communism has not only completely faded communism has not completely faded away into history. And the political system still runs several countries around the world. These communist states are governed by a single party system and finds its roots in Marxist ideology. Though their degree of adherence to classic communist economic policies may vary, they maintain central political control under a communist party. China is definitely one of the most well known communist states. They are governed by the Chinese Communist Party, or the CCP, and the country and its political system is authoritarian and controlled by one party. However, it has adopted some market oriented economic reforms, which brings it closer back to the classical economic, the classical communist economic systems that we see a lot when we talk about communism and when we think of communism in theory. And if you go on and study communism, you'll definitely hear the phrase that I've definitely thought of this when I studied communism. But I always thought whenever I read about it, when I read the Communist Manifesto, I was like, wow, this seems so good in theory. No class, wealth is equally distributed. It's like almost taking the form of equity, but not really. Everyone's equal. And, that it seems like a perfect utopia and it seems great. However, in practice, when we, read about history and we like learn about all of like the fall of communism, all this stuff, it doesn't really work. And this it's trial and error, of course. Like, you know, some things work out in theory. In theory they may work out, but in reality they don't. In practice they don't. And you'll continue to hear that a lot throughout communism, which is something I noticed a lot when I studied it. Back to it. Aside from China, other communist countries include Cuba, Vietnam, Laos, and North Korea. Bringing this into functional governments in our modern world, we can see diversity among government systems and what forms they may take on. By far, democracy is the most popular form of government, with more than half of the nations in the world being democracies. 97 out of 167 as of 2021. However, this may not remain true forever, as authoritarianism, oh my gosh, controls a quarter of the world population under democratically backsliding governments. For those who don't know, democratic backsliding is the regime-changing process towards autocracy, which means rule by one, in which political power becomes more arbitrary and repressive. Democratic backsliding has become more frequent since the end of the Cold War through the election of leaders or parties who dismantle democratic institutions. That was pretty dense. Um, like if you want to expand more on, if you want to know more about, you know, democracies and how, you know, the world, how each country, as a government functions, and how many, if you're ever curious, like how many, like, how, what are the civil rights in that country, because like, what is their freedom score? Like, let's take America. America, by stereotype, is very free. And, I feel like a lot of Americans, especially, Gen Zers, like my age, around my age, and millennials, we like to make jokes that, wow, America is so free. I can hear the eagles screeching, all this stuff, right? However, if you go onto freedomhouse.org, I'm pretty sure it is. It's this awesome website, and it shows you, like, it has a list of every single country in the world, and it tells you what form of government they are and what's their freedom score. And the freedom score is graded off of a few criteria. I can't really remember right now, but it's graded off a few criteria that, rate civil liberties and all this stuff and give you a freedom score. And last time I checked, I'm pretty sure the United States was at an 87, or around like the high 80s, low 90s. And I think the most democratically free country was maybe Denmark or Sweden, somewhere like that. And it's just a fascinating thing to like analyze, and I think if anyone does have the chance and is curious about it, they should go and visit freedomhouse.org. Or yeah, and it's just like a great, I get lost in it sometimes. I think it's really cool. Okay, moving on from government and, different forms of government. um Not only, like, each government has their own way of running things. Like, if we compare a democracy to, an authoritarian regime, these will vary very differently. But this, what I'm about to say, is, solely more on the freedom side, you know, more American. We're gonna switch over to America, since I feel as a large base of my listeners are from America, and we're here to learn about our government and how it affects us. So the government provides stability in goods and services for all of its citizens. The four main goods include toll goods, common goods, private goods, and public goods. Each one can break down like this. Toll goods are available to many. Many can use them, but only if they can pay the price. Think of cable TV or private school. Common goods are goods that all people may use free of charge, but are in limited supply of. So fish in the sea or fresh water. Private goods are goods that people can use free of charge, but are in limited supply of. Shoot, cut that out. Cut that out. Um, Private goods are goods that people can purchase in the quantity they need it. And this can come in the form of cell phones, automobiles, or homes. Lastly, public goods are goods that are provided by the government. So think of public education, mail service, national security, all that stuff. Governments create a structure by which goods and services can be made available to the people. In the United States, this is done through elected representatives to city councils, state legislators, and Congress, which is most commonly seen as a representative democracy and are responsible for making the laws to govern their respective jurisdictions. They also pass measures to raise money through the imposition of taxes on income, property, and sales. They also allocate funds, and where those funds go depend on what level of the government it is. Essentially, this is politics, the process by which choices are made regarding how resources will be allocated and which economic and social policies the government will pursue. Simply, politics is a process of who gets what and how. We commonly see egalitarianism, the belief that everyone should be treated equally, and individualism, the belief that each person is important and should have the freedom to make their own choices. each person is individual, basically, is what that's saying. And those two terms commonly appear in these situations. Civic engagement is a very important factor of, keeping a government running. And so basically, civic engagement describes the participation that connects the citizens to the government, which is a vital ingredient of politics, especially local politics. Citizens, especially in the US, influence what policies are pursued, what values the government should support, and where funding goes, and who makes the final decisions. The United States can best be described as a republic or a representative democracy, like I was saying earlier. Um, more moreover on civic engagement, um, I feel like as high schoolers, like there are just honestly everyone in general, everyone has a way to have influence over the government. you know, we live in a representative democracy, and you know, the people in legislature and Congress, we are their boss. We tell them what we want and what to do, and this is especially true in local government. And I've met with many representatives from my local government before. All the sweetest souls in the world. I love you guys all. You guys are amazing. And honestly, they'll listen to you. You know, in Idaho recently, we've seen lots of protests against, like, you know, the welcoming of everyone in schools. And, we've protested against Roe v. Wade, women production rights, all that stuff, gun control, all of this stuff, serious topics. And honestly, we've seen this through civil rights movements, like with MLK. They fought for, you know freedom of education for all, and to completely just write off, like discrimination and like segregation, and you know the racism. That was a big move to fight racism, which we've been seeing protests like pop up everywhere. And it's truly just, that is scratch it. If you're asking me, that's scratching the top of civic engagement. Protesting is really such a good way to, dive into that realm of civic engagement. And from there, we can start going to, like, there's so many programs out there where you can be a page to help your local government, like your local government representatives. Um, and you can simply just meet with the representatives of your jurisdiction, of your county, or your like area, and just like tell them what you believe and what you think. And not only like are your representatives like they speak for you to, the state, to the federal government. They are also such a good resource to help you learn way more about topics that you might not know based on the news, because it's so, biased or political, and it's just shadowed by those things. So reaching out to your local representatives in any circumstance, for any way, is truly a very, very valuable experience. And I've learned that before, and it's just amazing. Such amazing resources. Anyways, back to it. Um, well, a democracy is a government where political power, influence over institutions and leaders and policies, rests in the hands of the people. Like I was just saying, we are their boss. We tell them what to do, essentially. Not completely, but essentially. Um, and however, in a representative democracy, citizens do not govern directly and instead elect people to represent them and make decisions based on their behalf. So, sorry, let me rephrase that maybe. A true democracy, a pure democracy, like what the very first form of democracy, how democracy originated, with the Greeks and stuff. Yeah, if I'm getting my facts right. Um, they majority rule. The people govern themselves, and it wasn't done through representatives. However, in our form of government in the United States, we elect people, we tell them what we want, and they'll make decisions and laws to please the people and to have the people in mind, you know? This being said, making decisions and opinions known for voting for representatives who decide on our part are crucial and important parts of civic engagement, which contributes to the functioning of a representative democracy. Simply put, civic engagement can be as simple as just going out there and voting for your local representatives, like voting for in the presidential election, voting for our congressmen, voting for, like just local representatives, the city council, like any of that stuff that involves the government. That's civic engagement. That's saying who do you want to represent you in, our government, and who, like, civic engagement is so important because not only does it help you, you know, it does not only does it keep the government and democracy running, it also gives you control over what you can do and how you can, live. How you live your life gives us our basic freedoms, all of that stuff helps maintain all of that. This was a pretty dense episode, so I'm really excited to publish some more. Um, and I feel like moving forward, now that we have like the basics of like government and what it does for us, like moving on, we can talk about the politics of public opinion and how that ties into political parties and, like, and moving on with like once we have political parties, we'll talk about our government and truly the knits the what do they call it, the meat and potatoes of our government and its functions. And it's going to be great. Thank you guys so much. See you next time.